and then goes to Philadelphia and does nothing on the fourth line. Like, Montreal just gets all the great things out of guys like David Desharnais, Dale Weiss. Corey Perry had his best goal scoring here since his time in Anaheim. Like, Montreal just gets the best out of these lower tier, great offensive players. I think Paquette might be the next in line for that.
I mean, fans of a certain age might remember Steve Bégin as a perfect example of like your fourth line grinder who gives 100,000,000% every night, and people loved him. This is a guy who scored career highs in Montreal as well. Maria, you might want to maybe to brush up on our stats here. I think Steve Bégin once scored like a dozen goals or something. I know she's gonna.
Yeah, they just get the best out of everyone.
Yeah,
like they just milk everyone for all they can get, and it works. And I think it's going to work with Paquette this year.
I mean, say what you want, about the cultural or linguistic, identities to the Montreal Canadiens. Some people love it, some people hate it, and everything. But there's no denying that there's something, there's something about being born in Montreal and wearing that red sweater, the CH on your chest, and you just can't help but think the people that have worn this before you, like Roy, Bellevaux, Lafleur, Richard, all those players, but the same thing can be said for anybody in Minnesota, for example, which is another hockey hotbed. You're wearing a Minnesota jersey being like, all right, well, this isn't the Stars because they're in Dallas, but man, Mike Modano wore this. This is pretty cool, or so the same thing can be said in Western Canada as well. So yeah, I think, I agree with you. I think we're going to be surprised with what Paquette gives us. I don't think we're going to see 82 games out of him though, because he does play a very physical game as well. He is exactly in the image that Marc Bergevin likes his players. So we'll see. I mean, I think we'll see what the results are.
And that fourth line is jam-packed with guys that can fit in and kind of come out and come in as needed, and they can fit in really well with each other, I feel.
Endless possibilities.
As I mentioned, all the guys fighting for spots, too.
Yeah, exactly. Maria, did you get that goal count from Steve Bégin? What was his career high in Montreal?
Yeah, it was in 2005, 2006, 11 goals, 12 assists, 23 points.
See, for a guy who plays 8 minutes a night, isn't that incredible? See, Josh, you're right on the balls. When the guys are motivated and they give it their all, you never know what can happen. We have a knack of bringing out the best in everyone. All right, you're listening to Puck and Roll. We're talking about the Montreal Canadiens free agency. We're going to be talking about a little bit of everything for that matter, because we got so much to cover. The last week has been absolutely bananas. Free agency, the draft, the expansion draft as well. We might take some time to talk about he who shall not be named. I don't know if that's going to be okay with everyone here at some point. I think we all know what we're talking about, a certain first round pick. But before anything, I'm actually really pleased to introduce Elias Laradi, who is going to be our insider for Puck and Roll. This is a guy who's got connections left, right, and center. He's going to fill us in on rumors and such. I'm going to throw the ball. I'm going to pass the puck, actually. I'm going to use my sports analogies properly. We were talking about Jack Eichel before the show. Elliot Freeman mentioned that apparently the Canadiens made, what was considered a lowball offer for a Jack Eichel trade. What are you hearing on that front?
First of all, love the great stick analogy.
My pleasure.
In regards to Jack Eichel, I got this question actually asked a lot. I've been hanging out in Montreal sports bars for most of the week. And honestly, when you're looking at his contract, for Montreal to take on a second player who's going to be making $10 million a year, I really feel like it's cap heavy, number one. Number two, Buffalo is looking for an extremely high price. They're looking for at least two major prospects and a first-round pick. And I'm 100% sure, even I've heard Elliot and Pierre say this, the call that goes to Bergevin, they're saying either Nick Suzuki, Alexander Romanov. And that's where the conversation literally stops. And that's why I even told you, even before we started doing this podcast, I said, I'm really not surprised that the Habs made a lowball offer because, they weren't going to trade Suzuki. They weren't going to give Romanov. But who else would you be able to give to get him? And on top of that, be able to take care of that salary, which I find really isn't a good move. My personal take, everyone's been saying this a lot, Eichel to Vegas makes so much more sense, and they just cleared a bunch of cap space. Unfortunately, they got rid of Marc-Andre Fleury, which is a move that I did not agree with personally. So, I mean, that move can make sense. They have a load of prospects. They have a good amount of picks. I think that could probably be a move that I see coming.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we've been hearing a lot of Eichel in Vegas and with the Rangers as well, who are, obviously in on it because they're in on any American superstar. I understand that we have a need for centermen, but, in Montreal now we're going to be running Nick Suzuki on the first line. I mean, I know the question is going to be, is he going to be ready? Then we're going to have Kotkaniemi. Is he actually going to be ready to be holding second line minutes? Then we're going to have Jake Evans. Is he going to be ready to be holding a higher profile role? That's pretty much going to be what Phil Deneau used to give us. And then on the fourth line, we got Cédric Paquette, and we forgot to mention because this just came in. And Maria, if you can maybe try to get us the info on this, the signature of Mathieu Perreault has just been announced while we were recording this. Who's I'm guessing is going to be filling the fourth line role. So if you could just check out what the contract on that is. But I mean, Jack Eichel is Jack Eichel. Like, take away personality, take away, Buffalo, like, which is, an absolute hole for where big hockey players go and die almost. But I mean, wouldn't he be a good addition to Montreal regardless of the price?
He has skill. He's young. He has all the potential. I'm pretty sure if he was on a good team, he'd be, killing it. He'd be in the playoffs almost every year. But unfortunately, he went to Buffalo, which is basically like, I would say, like, it's like the death penalty, kind of like, if I were to make an example. Burn. But like you said, the biggest issue in Montreal now is we have a glaring issue at center. I'm sorry, Nick Suzuki is a great player, but if Nick Suzuki is our number one center, Montreal is going to be in a lot of trouble. It's an 82-game season. We're going back to the Atlantic Division. There's Tampa, there's Boston, there's Toronto. There's Florida. It's so competitive. Like, all the analysts are basically saying that if Montreal doesn't fix their issue at center, there's basically like no chance that they actually make the playoffs next year.
So for the contract for Mathieu Perreault, it's 1 year, $950K.
Oh, cheap. That's awesome. Not bad for a guy who just came off of $4.5 million contract or something in Winnipeg. Scott, your take on Eichel?
Yeah, because I find it's what Elias said. What Elias said about the Buffalo Sabres sort of being a graveyard or a place where sort of players just go to struggle and they go to flounder and places like that. Buffalo's had a culture that's been based around losing and unsuccessfulness for way too long now. And when they were in their 18-game losing streak last year, and they had that weird situation where they had a current Hab signings, Josh MSJ and D, play on their first line for one game, and everyone was thinking, what the heck's going on? This offseason has done nothing to make me think that they're going to be able to get out of that slump anytime soon. And I think one of the main reasons that they're pushing so hard on Eichel and they're asking for so much is because they got criticized so heavily for getting nothing for Taylor Hall and for getting nothing at the trade deadline for all these players that they gave away. And even Steve Dangle made a really good tweet that said that the Sabres, they don't have a goaltender on their roster right now. If you go on the Cap Friendly website and you check the Sabres organizational depth, they don't have a goaltender. Their only option is Dustin Tokarski, who's in the AHL currently. So I find that Eichel going to Montreal will be an interesting move, but I think in my own personal opinion, I think Eichel really wants to go to a place where he can win and win now and not have to deal with even a slightly losing culture or a culture that's in the midst of a rebuild or is in a very middling state. So I feel like Montreal is probably best to stay away from it for the time being, and I think they can survive with the players they have and maybe gamble on a surprise performance here or there.
We're going to throw it directly to Josh, but we've chatted before, and you've mentioned that, there might be some surprise players that might fill in.
Yeah. Well, we've seen what a true number one center is going to get in this environment right now, and that's really not going to happen for Bergevin. But there is a UFA that I think might be interesting. Now, I'm just spitballing, haven't heard anything concrete or anything if he's even going to go anywhere. But David Krejci is a name that might be a little interesting. He's a second-line center.
I have actually heard that name come up. You bring up a really excellent point. Actually, the French media has brought up the name of David Krejci a few times. Is he still useful for a team like the Canadiens that are really based on speed and crashing the net and whatnot at this point?
Well, does he want to leave Boston?
Yeah, I would totally think so. I mean, the thing that a lot of people seem to forget about Krejci is that he had a 44-point season this past season, and he's 2 seasons removed from a 73-point season. Krejci has been one of the Bruins' most consistent top 6 players for his entire tenure there. And for him to go to free agency at this age and with the chance to be underpaid for his services, I think Montreal should totally look after him. He's an unbelievable player who has been consistent his entire career, and he seems like he's aging like fine wine.
I mean, Josh, do you think he could be like another Corey Perry type solution for Montreal?
Yeah, I think he is at this point still a bit better than Corey Perry. Just at his age, he's a bit younger. He's in a better position for Montreal being in center. I think he just would be really good at taking the pressure off Nick Suzuki, not having to be that pure cut number one, and then dropping Jesperi Kotkaniemi back to the number 3 spot, which is probably where he should be at this point to help his development. I don't think the higher time and work rate and better players that he would be playing against in a second line role would really help him gain the confidence he needs that he's been lacking in the regular season so far. Just as a more temporary solution as our young centers keep getting better and better, because they are going to get better and better. Eventually, Nick Suzuki will be that clear-cut number 1 guy.
You're listening to Puck and Roll, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're going to set the floor for something a little bit more... I don't know how exactly how to put it. Now we're going into Mystery Land. Mystery Land is the NHL draft, and this year's draft has been particularly eventful for many reasons. The first is that 3/4 of the junior leagues barely played, if at all, last year. So there were a lot of blind picks and surprise picks, for that matter. I'm going to give the floor to Scott Cowan, Sebastian High, who are our experts, so to speak, on anything regarding the rookies for the Habs. Let's address the elephant in the room. I mean, we've joked around about he who shall not be named. Logan Mailloux. He got picked 31st overall. He comes with, baggage for something stupid that he's done in Sweden. If anybody listening who's been living under a rock, do a quick Google. Just check it out for yourselves. Make your own opinion of it. We're not here to judge. We're not here to condemn. I think everything has been said. But let's talk about Mailloux, the player. Let's talk about the impact that he may or may not have on the Montreal Canadiens. Guys, if you guys want to talk about, the whole ordeal around it, of course, I mean, you're more than welcome. But Scott, Sebastian, I mean, let's get Logan Mailloux out of the way first. How did you guys react when the pick was announced?
I think that you made a really good point there, Patrick, about just putting the situation off the ice to rest. There's a lot of things to talk about regarding Mailloux. Everything's been said that what needs to be said for the moment. The Canadiens are dealing with this in their own way. I don't want to comment on the way they're dealing with it. There's things that have been going on off the ice, like Jeff Molson's press conference that I didn't know about. Most newspapers didn't know about because he didn't want them to know about it for whatever reason. And then you have also issues with what Bergevin's statements, Molson releasing the statement about Mailloux on the day of free agency. Who knows why he did that? There's a lot of things like that I think we just need to put on the wayside. And even then, talking about Mailloux as a player, Logan Mailloux was not ranked as a first-round pick. He was ranked as a mid, early, late second-round pick. From what I hear, Montreal was worried about losing him in the second round, which is a really ridiculous thing to think about considering all the controversy surrounding him. When I was watching the NHL draft, I thought that Tyler Boucher to Ottawa was the most surprising pick of the draft. I had no clue who Boucher was. I knew he was Brian Boucher's son, but that doesn't really mean anything.
I don't think anybody saw that coming. And
no,
for that
totally,
matter,
at all.
When I saw that, I was like, Pierre McGuire, ladies.
Completely. For sure. Completely. I think Pierre Dorian had some actual knives in his back on that pick. But the thing that I think just to mention about Mailloux is that he wasn't ranked as a first-round pick. And I think Montreal, even if they had wanted to take him, could have taken him in the 5th round, the 6th round. They could have taken him as a later-round pick, and they could have avoided this whole thing. Or even better, just waited a year and avoided the whole thing. So while I do think that Mailloux is a promising prospect at times with some of his abilities on offense, he had a -14 rating in the Swedish third division. So I'm just going to leave things at that for the time being and throw it over to Sebastian.
Yeah, like the main reason he was ranked so low by everyone was because of the baggage. Like he dropped a lot, but because it only became public to us very recently what he did. But teams and like scouting agencies knew of this for months because it happened back in November, right? So these people knew of it, which is why he was such a low rank. And personally, I never would have picked the guy. But okay, as a player, and it's difficult for me to separate the two because I never would have picked the guy. But as a pure player, again, he's big, which Montreal loves. He's an offensive defenseman with a booming shot. So he's really viewed as a Weber replacement, which is also